Patlabor began life as an original concept by Masami Yuki. In 1986, he, along with Kazunori Ito, Akemi Takada, and Yutaka Izubuchi, proposed the project to Bandai in hopes of getting it made into a TV series. While they weren't successful in getting it produced as a TV series, they were able to get it done in the OVA format, which was just as well. The OVA format provided more freedom, and there weren't as many restrictions as there were for TV. However, Bandai told them that in order to manage the project, they had to make a company. They weren't keen on it, but they didn't have a choice. And thus, the company Headgear was born. Masami Yuki and Kazunori Ito came up with the name. The members and their roles are as follows: Kazunori Ito being the screenwriter, Yutaka Izubuchi being the mechanical designer, Akemi Takada as character designer, and of course Masami Yuki providing the concepts. The fifth member, and the last to come on board, was director Mamoru Oshii. Oshii's previous works included the first OVA ever, Dallos, being the chief director of the Urusei Yatsura TV series, for the first 100 episodes or so, and also directing the first 2 Urusei Yatsura movies, Beautiful Dreamer being the standout of the bunch. But after Angel's Egg and The Red Spectacles, his career started to stall out. It wasn't really getting anywhere. But then Kazunori Ito showed up one day and offered him the directing chair on Patlabor, and Oshii thought, why not? In an interview with Shinsuke Nakajima, he stated the following, quote, "Back then, I had pretty much lost hope. I did Tenchi no Tamago, aka Angel's Egg, then The Red Spectacles. Then it came to Labyrinth Files number 538. I felt like I'd hit rock bottom, but there was a part of me that felt really gung-ho. The more flack I got from people, the more satisfied I felt, and I was happy with what I was doing. Hey, you got a problem with this was kinda how I felt. But the situation was getting worse. It was like the Japanese military that got cut off from their supplies, or I guess I should say, like the Germans on the Russian front, where they were low on supplies and equipment and winter was at hand. It's like I was in a tiger tank that advanced far into enemy territory. I had no idea what I should do. That's when Patlabor came along and changed everything. I suppose you could say this series showed up with perfect timing, but back then I didn't see it that way. I got into it thinking, man, I gotta eat, so I guess I'll have to take this whether I like it or not." End quote. He also took the job because he thought it'd be fun to make a robot series. The series was released in 7 installments, from April 1988 to June 1989, for a very low price of 4,500 yen each, which was equivalent to about $30 to $35 if I've got that correct. But the series was a hit, and a new franchise was born, creating movies, television series, OVAs, toys, manga, and even a new live-action series that was chief directed by Oshii himself. So what makes this so special? Well, let's dive right in. The intro to the series states that with the rapid development of hyper technology, there came a massive humanoid construction machine called the Labor, which spread into pretty much every field. But with that came labor crime, and thus a police force had to be formed in order to deal with it.
The Tokyo Metro Police founded the Special Vehicles Section 2 within the Security Division to combat these ever-growing crimes. This was the beginning of the SV2 Patrol Labor, Patlabor units.
The introduction to this series was done by Hiroyuki Kitakubo, who made Rojin Z and Blood the Last Vampire. Funny story about this was, he wasn't a very fast worker when it came to doing this, and so while many parts of the OVA were getting completed ahead of him, he was still working on it, and so Oshii was getting worried that it won't be done in time for the show to get released. But I'm assuming it was because, well, here it is. We open up on SV2 headquarters, as we see a bunch of mechanics awaiting the arrival of the Type 98 Patlabor units. The head of the SV2 maintenance crew is Seitaro Sakaki, regarded as a god of vehicle maintenance, and his subordinate is Shigeo Shiba, and both of them are eager to have the Type 98s to work on.
I'm so happy I could just cry! In the 3 months since the SV2 was founded, they've called us trash! They've called us their appendix, a fifth wheel. But today, we'll kiss those hard days goodbye with the arrival of those 3 new labors, as we're aboard as a real patrol labor unit.
But they're gonna have to wait a little longer for them because they're delayed, they're trapped in traffic. Yeah, as you will notice in this dub, it's not the best. The reason I'm using it is because it makes editing easier, which is why I will always recommend to people that they watch this in Japanese with English subtitles. That's where it's at. In the meantime though, let's get introduced to members of the SV2 second unit. First, we have Asuma Shinohara, who was the son of the owner of Shinohara Heavy Industries, who is one of the largest companies that produces labors. He's a cop because, well, his father forced him into it. There's Mikiyasu Shinshi, who was the only married member of the SV2 second unit. He's very mild-mannered and knowledgeable, unlike the labor pilot who he will be partnered up with, Isao Oda. He's very hot-headed, and when he arrives, he instantly wants to do some target practice, but is told that is impossible. due to red tape and regulations.
How are you going to fire without a labor?
I'll borrow one from the first unit.
Doubt they'll lend you one.
Then once my labor gets here...
Don't you know you can only fire a gun of that caliber at the Fuji shooting range, and the self-defense forces have it booked through the entire winter? You have to put in an application to get ammunition, and it takes a month to get it after strict review. Don't waste valuable bullets and avoid live fire practice as much as possible. Should the need arise, do the job with one shot.
We also have Hiromi Yamazaki. He is a man who, despite his large stature, is shy to the point of being unsociable. And the last of the officers to arrive is Noa Izumi. The commander of the second unit is Keiichi Goto, who, despite his laid-back personality, is actually a very effective leader, as we will see not only in this OVA, but in the movies and in the TV series. Okay, funny thing about Goto here, Akemi Takada based his design off of Tetsuya Nakadai from Akira Kurosawa's High and Low, while Goto's speech, at least in Japanese, is based on Nakadai's performance from Epoch of Murder Madness from 1967. His nature is in contrast to that of Shinobu Nagumo, who was the commander of the SV2 first unit. Unlike the second unit, which is made up of rookie cops, her unit is made up of veterans and elite members of the police. And she's kind of mad that the SV2 second unit is getting the Type 98s ahead of her first unit.
I hope you have some good people.
Why wouldn't I?
They passed up my unit of veterans and gave you those top-of-the-line labors.
That was headquarters' decision. It was also their decision to send us these 5 people. You want them? I mean, the new labors.
I want them.
Can't have them.
Unlike other giant robot shows of the period, the Patlabor series would be about the trials and tribulations of your neighborhood police officer, except with robots. One of the ways of doing this was to show the officers in, well, rather mundane situations, such as waiting for equipment to be delivered, knowing where to get food, dealing with red tape and regulations, and of course the difficulties of dealing with repairs and mobilization. Oh, and having to follow police protocol, which is something that Oda is not always happy to do. In a way, Oshii decided to treat SV2 headquarters with this rookie bunch as kind of like a school, where they're not fully matured yet and will grow up as they work in the real world. Also, showing the kind of mundane nature of everything was also due to financial reasons. Because this series had a very low budget, filming action sequences and showing scenes of labors getting destroyed or getting repaired had to be very carefully crafted because those were very expensive to animate. Heck, they even had to save money in regards to setting. In the original concept, SV2 headquarters was supposed to take place, I think, somewhere in the middle of Tokyo, but Mamoru Oshii came up with the idea of setting it on a strip of reclaimed land. It would save them a bit more money because they didn't have to draw as many buildings, and they can just focus on blue sky and surrounding countryside. But of course, this piece doesn't last forever, and they get called out on an assignment. 2 men have stolen a labor and are going on a rampage, and each person is delegated their roles. Noa and Oda pilot the Type 98s, with Shinji being in a command car assisting Oda, and Shinohara being in a command car assisting Noa. Hiromi is to work heavy equipment, while Goto gives orders from a squad car. Now, since the Type 98s were not delivered to SV2 headquarters, they had to go pick them up in traffic. And the team is able to take down the criminals, despite some difficulties, such as Oda getting too hot-headed and opening fire on the enemy labor, not only losing his head, but hilariously causing a bunch of trouble to the local police. That's something about this series. Although it's a little more grounded than a lot of other giant robot shows, there is still room for silliness and comedy, because as Oshii admitted, if you made it too real, it loses its fun. Noa even loses an arm to the perpetrators, but she uses that very same arm to take them down. Overall, this episode is a really good introduction to Patlabor. It does its job well. It sets up the world and the characters, and hopefully it gets you to come back for more. As I understand it, since Oshii thought this Patlabor OVA was likely going to be a one-time thing, he decided to try, with each episode, a different genre. So if the first episode was kind of like new kids coming to a school and getting used to things, then episode 2 functions more as a police story. I love the way this episode opens too. It opens up with the presentation of a new labor, but it looks like something out of the super robot genre.
The Patrol Labor AV-2. Power booster, fixed wings, and a propulsion device are attached to a standard labor, making it capable of flight, and gives us the ability to combat aerial crimes, which will come in the near future.
And of course, Noa is chosen to pilot it. But things start to go wrong really, really fast.
I'm losing propulsion! I can't gain any altitude!
It'll be another 10 years before labors will fly, that's for sure. And that power booster thing? Boy, only you could come up with a classic dream like that one.
Anyway, Noah and Asuma are on the way to pick up Sergeant Kuka Clancy of the NYPD. She's come all the way from the United States to deliver some important information regarding the New York mayor's visit. Apart from this being a goodwill visit, he's also there to take a look at the Babylon Project. The Babylon Project is primarily why usage and labor skyrocketed. The project was to build a seawall to protect from rising sea levels and to reclaim land.
It'll seal off the entire Bay Area, build giant sluices, and over the course of 50 years reclaim that land, solving the metro area's land problems in one blow.
But there are plenty out there that oppose this project, and so a terrorist organization called Beach House may be involved in a plot to strike the New York mayor. So that's why the SV2, along with other police departments, are tagged on as security detail. Before and during the mayor's visit, precautions are taken to make things safe. At one of the places in which Noah and Asuma are stationed, a suspicious-looking lady points Asuma towards a mobile command center, one that would be used by the police, only to find out the next day that one shouldn't be there.
They're not Strategic Air Force or Spectre. If they're gonna make a mobile command center like that, they could at least come down and use the darn thing once in a while.
What are you talking about, Shinohara?
I saw it yesterday. It was in Central Park, smack in the front of the Diet Building.
The department doesn't have anything like that.
And so Shinohara and Noah have to rush to get over there. There is a rather humorous moment in this episode in which Noah has to grab onto a blimp in order to get over a bridge, thus showing further the limitations of labor technology at this time. They get there to find that it's not so much a bomb as a missile launcher turret, and Asuma, with help from Kuka over the radio, he has to disarm the bomb. Of course, since this is a police story, a bomb threat makes for good suspense. And Oshii said that making this episode gave him some experience on how to handle suspense. And as usual, it comes down to the red wire, blue wire thing. Of course, Asuma can't really seem to make a decision, but Kuka shows up at the last minute to cut the right wire.
You did it.
Ine the Gadget Ito, age 72, wanted internationally for a total of 22 violations of explosives handling.
If I ever run into her again, I'm gonna kill her.
If you had done your job and looked through those wanted flyers, this wouldn't have happened.
And finally, by the end, for reasons that are not entirely clear to me, Kuka is transferred to the SV2 for a year.
Allow me to reintroduce our guest who has just been assigned here for a one-year study period. Sergeant Kuka Clancy. Take good care of her.
Episode 2 of the OVA marked the first time that Kuka Clancy made an appearance in this show, and she quickly became a fan favorite, but Mamoru Oshii always had a problem with her. He considered her a very typical anime character. She's a character that's perfect in every way, has no real flaws, and everything turns out great for her. He just felt that he couldn't really work with a character like that. There's not much to go on. He aired his grievances to the other members of Headgear, but he lost the battle. Everybody else wanted her. And she was really the creation of mechanical designer Yutaka Izubuchi. The character is half Japanese, but really, she's fully American, and according to Oshii, she was the typical image of what the Japanese view Americans as, and he didn't really get that. In fact, at the beginning of the episode, she arrives on a military plane, and she carries a .45. You're not allowed to bring guns into Japan, and she still carries one throughout the rest of the OVA. But what was funny later on is that Oshii said when they tried to give her weaknesses, it made her more unlikable, so they couldn't win. Well, Oshii's dislike of her is probably the reason why she only appears at the end of Patlabor 1, probably for fan service, and she doesn't appear at all in Patlabor 2. While I do understand some of Oshii's criticisms, I don't mind Kuka that much. She doesn't annoy me like a crap ton of girl bosses in today's fiction, and she doesn't dominate the show. And this second episode wasn't too bad either. It pretty much set the foundation for the kind of threats that the SV2 would face, in a lot of cases anyway. This next episode is unique to say the least. Apart from this episode being the introduction to Detective Matsui, one who would become a very good friend to Goto, and one who would be of great help to the SV2 in doing investigative work, in later episodes, and even in the 2 Mamoru Oshii movies, this episode is also the most hated of the OVA. Why? Well, remember when I said that Oshii wanted to try out different genres? Well, this one involves a giant monster. I'm not kidding. The episode opens with a couple in a parked car at Tokyo Bay. While the boyfriend goes out to get a soda, the woman in the car is taken away into the sea. But according to Detective Matsui, she was found later alive but in shock. That, combined with numerous damages related to the Babylon project, Matsui had to go to Shikaki and Shige of the SV2 in order to pilot a remote underwater submersible in order to find the cause. It's a giant monster. Yeah, this episode is clearly inspired by Godzilla. There's even a part of the episode where Noah, Asuma, and Kaneka go see a scientist who created the monster looking like Dr. Serizawa from the original Godzilla film. The rest of the episode consists of the SV2 mobilizing and trying to come up with ways to deal with the monster, talking to the scientist himself about how to do that. They're trying to come up with ways to destroy the creature because the scientist fears it could lay eggs and therefore pose a threat to man. Even going so far as to include Shige coming up with an oxygen destroyer to destroy the creature. Again, very much like the original Godzilla film. The monster rises out of the ocean due to the oxygen destroyer being activated, and just as the SV2 is getting prepared to open fire on the creature, Hiromi goes and looks at the creature and sympathizes with it, and then the creature just turns around and walks back into the ocean. How anticlimactic. Hell, even Shinohara says so.
It was a dramatic and all too unsatisfying end of the story. Several days later, after it was seen heading south into the Pacific, it vanished, never to reappear.
Of all the episodes of the original Patlabor OVA, Mamoru Oshii likes this episode the best. He thought it would be fun to do a parody of giant monster movies, but this is the worst received episode of the OVA. Not only did fans hate it, but other members of Headgear didn't even like it. Animation director Kazuchika Kise hated it, and apparently even Kazunori Ito was dumbfounded by it, even though it was Ito that proposed the idea. Kazunori Ito, by the way, would go on to write the Heisei-era Gamera films, and if any of you haven't seen that, then shame on you. Stop what you're doing and watch those right now. And sadly, I kind of have to agree. Even though I thought animation-wise it's probably the best of the OVA, and there were several moments that genuinely did make me laugh. I don't hate this episode by any means, but it just doesn't really fit in with the rest of the Patlabor franchise. This is the kind of episode that feels like a bad dream that a character in the Patlabor franchise would have. That's my feeling on it anyway. Now the fourth episode is one I really enjoy. It's pretty funny. It begins with a hostage situation that looks like it just bores the SV2 stiff.
Kazunori, please come out! Kazunori!
Where's our money, getaway car, and lunches?
But Oda, being impatient that nothing is getting done, barges in and fires his gun inside the building. Fortunately, the first chamber was loaded with a blank and nobody was killed. But of course, Goto is horrified by this situation, hilariously so, and chews the whole team out.
What do you think you're piloting? Great Mazinger? For Pete's sake, this isn't some robot cartoon whose main character is an autistic kid or some punk.
Okay. I found that line funny.
The top brass aren't thankful that Sakaki loaded a blank into the first chamber, just to be sure. They're angry as hell. Some are even calling for the SV2 to be disbanded.
So the whole team is sent to this camp to retrain, and Goto will oversee all of it. But spooky things begin to happen as they arrive. From a ghost girl saying, to a swamp residue covered labor with a skeleton inside, to even hearing stories about a girl that was killed during an accident, the accident being that the girl was killed during a mock combat from a gun loaded with a paint bullet. It leads the team to do some investigative work. I won't give away all the hilarious details, but it leads them all to figure out that all the spooky incidents were organized by Commander Goto, and that Commander Nagumo and various others were in on it. Basically, this elaborate thing was to teach the team to exercise more caution when using their weapons.
This is Mahoko Goto, Captain Goto's niece.
Hello! Sorry, Uncle. I couldn't keep the secret. She was too good. I spilled the beans.
Sorry.
So yeah, this episode is hilarious to me. It kind of plays like an episode of Scooby-Doo, only more awesome. And with robots. This is my favorite of all the Patlabor OVA episodes. Oh, I almost forgot. I also have to add that the Patlabor OVA marks the second of a fruitful creative collaboration between Mamoru Oshii and Kenji Kawai, the first being the Red Spectacles. Kenji Kawai approached each individual episode as if he were doing a new project, as in he would write new music for each one. This is different from how when music is done in television series, they would reuse themes over and over. Kenji Kawai would write the music for most, if not all, of the Patlabor franchise. Now, episodes 5 and 6 are essentially one long episode. It's a two-parter, called the SV2's Longest Day. It begins with the SV2 and a lot of other people in that department on break, except Goto, who begins to notice something very wrong. It turns out in the long run that Goto had every right to be suspicious. Between shady figures following him, bad guys breaking through a security checkpoint and opening fire on police, and Goto believing his phone to be tapped, leads into a conclusion that an old friend of his, named Kai, is planning something big. And indeed, he is. Kai and his rogue group in the self-defense forces basically catch all of Tokyo with their pants down and seize control of the city. Well, almost. Thanks to the foresight of Goto, and with assistance from Shinobu, Shinobu successfully engages in a police standoff against the rogue agents of the self-defense forces. Between Shinobu disagreeing with the higher-ups as to whether or not they go with or without a fight, she wants to stand and fight and defend the city, whereas the higher-ups want to pull a retreat as they fear Kai may have a nuclear weapon, and Kai's ultimatum that the government suspend the diet, ban political parties, and suspend the constitution, Goto is going to need all the help he can get from Detective Matsui and even his team to bring this man down. Now, unlike some of the other episodes I've talked about, I don't want to spoil this one too much. Because even though it is essentially a prototype to the masterful Patlabor 2, the SV2's Longest Day is actually a really good story in its own right. I would say that my biggest disappointment with the SV2's Longest Day is that I don't understand Kai's motives. I don't understand why he wants political parties dissolved or the Constitution suspended. I'm gonna hold off talking about this one in any real depth until I get to Patlabor 2, so that way I can compare and contrast both. Well, that and I'm just really eager to talk about Patlabor 2. I really like that movie. Now, this 7th episode of the OVA is a pretty unique one. It's the only one of the OVA that is not directed by Mamoru Oshii, for reasons I'll get into in a moment. This episode was directed by Naoyuki Yoshinaga. This one chronicles the SV2 dealing with the terrorist organization Beach House, trying to steal a military labor developed by a European company. But it's the kind of episode where a unique mix-up ensues. At the beginning, the truck with the military labor is stolen from a Beach House operative who was arrested by the police, and that is where the SV2 get their tip as to where it's heading next. The episode does end with a pretty cool fight scene in which we see Noah getting better and better piloting her labor, even if she does need help from the average Joe who stole the truck on impulse, as he is able to pilot the military labor as it resembles ones that he works with on the job. Because of his assistance, Goto and Nagumo won't report him. Now, this episode was not planned from the start. Oshii did his 6 episodes and I think was going to move on to other projects, but Patlabor started to become successful and a movie was planned. So he was on pre-production on the film while this episode was being made. According to Oshii, Headgear wouldn't receive royalties for work beyond the 6 episodes, according to the contract. But when the series became popular and started to sell well, Headgear negotiated for more pay, as they were not paid that well from the start. So the production company came up with an idea for a 7th episode, which would be released in conjunction with Patlabor the movie, and they agreed to pay an additional sum for it. Now, Yuki Yoshinaga, who directed this episode, would also go on to direct the TV series, and he did a good job here. And animation-wise, this episode looks great. They definitely had more money to work with, and the detail and craftsmanship here are really, really high. This is another one that I really enjoy, and I'm glad that it ends well. The Early Days is an appropriate subtitle for this OVA. Patlabor was a franchise that was still finding its footing. Between its limited budget, sparse action, and some mistakes made during the creative process, a special piece of work was still born. From the setting, the memorable ensemble cast of characters, Goto being my favorite of the bunch, and the tone that fluctuates comfortably from comedic to deadly serious, Patlabor is a franchise I absolutely recommend, especially if you're into giant robots. So next up in this series looking at the Patlabor franchise is, well, Patlabor the movie.